You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about the Friday the 13th movie franchise with Josh Spiegel of Movie Timelines. Here we go. You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau and returning guest, Josh Spiegel. You may know Josh from his YouTube channel, Movie Timelines, with over 50,000 subscribers. Josh does deep dives into movie franchises that have multiple movies. Nightmare on Elm Street, the Halloween movies. He even tackles Stephen King adaptations, Christmas horror movies, John Carpenter films. Josh is also the author of the book, Timelines of Terror, The Fractured Continuities of Horror Film Sequels. It's published by McFarlane. So Josh, with your series, Movie Timelines, I did note that your first version of the Friday the 13th franchise was your first timeline video. I mean, you wound up kind of redoing it, but that was your first one out of the gate.
The Friday the 13th timeline was the whole reason for creating the channel in the first place.
He was a quiet guy, a bit of a loner, and a really big hockey fan. Let TNT give you the creeps with 5 of the best Friday the 13th movies, all in one night. Try and survive a Friday the 13th marathon, starting 1 week from tonight at 8 on TNT.
I needed a creative outlet. My wife and I were working on a web series that just was not working out because she's very difficult to get to film. And I wanted to film on a regular basis, but I would be asking her, be like, hey, do you want to shoot tonight? Can we shoot tonight? Not tonight. All right, how about tomorrow? Maybe. So I was just like, I need to do something by myself here. And I, on a whim, had just sat down and decided to watch all the Friday the 13th movies back to back. And in the second movie, this is when it first started, because the guy was just like, about 5 years ago. I was like, oh, that's weird. I didn't realize it was 5 years later. But this movie came out like less than a year after. And it stuck out as being weird. But then I noticed that the next movie took place right after that. And then the fourth movie took place right after that. And it was just a weird thought in my head of like, last 3 movies took place like back to back. And then it was a 5-year jump. So how long? And then, so I started to calculate it all out. And then as I kept watching, I kept thinking about it. It's just like, wait a minute, none of this makes any sense. Like, what year is this? There's like a 10-year time jump in this video. In this movie, what is going on here? And that became the obsession of trying to track it down and figure out how long there was in between each of those movies. And then it turned into a thing.
I love how you went from when we were talking last time about the Amityville franchise and kind of how your channel evolved from your wife and you kind of being foodies, not being able to kind of like make time to make those videos because like you just mentioned your wife's schedule to, you know what, I'm just going to go like on the deep end of the pool into like horror movies and franchises. Fertile ground for sure. And something that, you know, your 50,000+ subscribers have dug in with you on as you've evolved from that. To the 80s project, like a lot of different things, but really like that was the franchise. Friday the 13th was the one that kind of went from your wife being, hey, you got to find a way to like an outlet.
Well, the funny thing is I didn't even tell her that I was making that video. I just like, because I thought she'd be like, wait, we're doing something without me. Because technically she was fired from our web series and I just started one without her. I didn't tell her that I had done it until it was like uploaded and ready to go.
You re-recorded that one, didn't you, Josh? Because you weren't happy with that original one.
Yeah, I mean, when I go back and when I look at a lot of my earlier videos, it's like I feel as if the channel has evolved quite a bit in terms of sound quality, in terms of video quality, the green screen. Like, I mean, I didn't really know how to green screen that well back in the day, and my green screen was pretty crappy, and I was just using like the camera that was on my computer, pretty low end. And now I shoot it all in HD and it's like much nicer and the green screen is a lot more complicated. Yeah, I kept looking at some of the older videos. At number one, I would say, God, I hate looking at this. And also, you know, one of the things that I realized is that my writing has evolved quite a bit because in that first video, I'm talking about 12 movies and it's like a 15-minute video. And I think I spend about a minute or so talking about each movie. And nowadays I talk about 3 movies, 3 minutes per movie. So my episodes are much longer. And my redo of the Friday the 13th movie is like over a half hour long, talking about the same movies. So it's just the stuff that I talk about when I watch a movie has evolved quite a bit. I mean, I think that part of the charm of it is often that this stuff is wonky. When I watch a film series that has it all together, it feels like less exciting. You know, it's kind of these guys actually seem to know what they're doing in terms of content.
But you actually took time to figure this out.
I know, that's less interesting. So like it is kind of more fun when you're trying to figure out when it's kind of when you have something where a character's just like, yeah, 15 years ago this happened, and you're like, wait, what? That 15 years ago? But I mean, they're wearing the same clothes. It's like it's the same fashion sense, and it's like the last one has a big calendar up that says like 1980, and they're like 15 years ago, and next movie is 1982. It's like, wait, what? That's the stuff that I think is it's kind of fun. Like I always hope that like when somebody sees me like enjoying this stuff and poking fun at it and the ways that we do, that it's of reverence, and I really enjoy all of that. I mean, it's why I love all the low budget, the super low budget indie movies. I've had a lot of the creators over the course of these years that have commented on the videos, and most of them are favorable. I mean, in the earlier part of the channel, I was a little harsher towards some of the people that made the movies, and I've certainly changed that up a little bit because I don't really have any ill will towards these guys. I super respect what they are able to do with very low budgets. Even these guys making like movies that are less than $10,000, and they're out there making a movie in their backyard with their friends, and that takes a lot of drive. So I reserve most of my scorn now for the big budget ones. Like it's like you see that, hey, this was made for $20 million, and it still is crap.
Well, I think your reverence for these movies definitely comes through on the video, and I certainly appreciate the forensic work that goes into something like tackling the Friday the 13th series. Like I specifically, the screen freeze on Tommy Jarvis's medical records history in part 5 when he's at Trembling Hills, wherever there's little halfway houses, and pointing out like doctor is misspelled twice in 2 different places, and and theorizing as to what medications Tommy might have been on as a young child was that's the good stuff, because it's just fun. Like you said, like this should be all taken with like a grain of salt and just enjoyed for what it is.
Well, I mean, and that's the amazing thing, too, is because no one ever is predicting where technology is going to go. And most of the Friday the 13th movies were from the early to mid 80s. Almost none of these movies were made with the notion that people would be able to freeze frame them at home in high definition. And that was never even a thought process. So that's why I love to see all those like weird little errors that are on those like just random screens that pop up. Nowadays in the modern movies, I feel like they pay a little bit closer attention to that kind of stuff. And I kind of enjoy when people, like, there's been a couple of times where if you pause, there's like a newspaper article and you're supposed to look at the big headline in the picture. But if you pause it and you read the article down below, it's very clear that the director like put in a little message for people that would pause it on there.
Well, it's also fun too, because like you have to remember and think back, like when these were being made, there was no like Kevin Feige from Marvel that was like, let's map out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sequels to this. It was like, they churned out the one, it was a hit, and they're like, oh shit, we got to make another one, and let's get this out within the next year. So you could have that throwaway line of like, oh yeah, she was attacked 5 years ago, because I'm sure they're not thinking like, yeah, we're not going to be at Jason goes into space at some point. We're going to have to like back any of this stuff up. So this is a good throwaway line. And then as each progressive film comes along, it's like, do we try to square this circle, or let's just keep going with it?
Well, and that's the interesting thing to see about a franchise where you have a bunch of different filmmakers coming into it with their own approach versus those franchises that have one person that's kind of the creative driving force. Like Child's Play has a little closer continuity than most of the other ones because Don Mancini is kind of like writing all of them. So it has a little bit closer. But then you've got the Friday the 13th movies, which, I don't think there's a single returning writer or director in the entire thing. I mean, there's some that like came back, like Sean Cunningham came back and did part 9 or whatever. It's just this sort of individualized take. So almost every one of them wasn't thinking about the franchise as this greater whole. Most of them were just thinking, yeah, this is my movie, this is my Friday the 13th, and this is the universe I'm setting it in. And none of them really cared. Like, oh, but when did the last one take place? This won't make sense if I have a 10-year time jump here. That won't make any sense. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's their Friday the 13th movie, and that's what they're focused on.
And that's something you brought up too when we were talking about Amityville. That actually gave me kind of like a different lens to look at the horror movies, because your comment were like, in these horror films, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, the kind of like the big three, the one constant is the antagonist, the slasher. That's the person that people are going to the theaters to see, not the teenagers. Like, they're just meant to be victims. They're stereotypes. They kind of lean into that. But like you had brought up, yeah, like it's kind of a reversal where you're not following the hero, because in this case, Jason is the hero. He's the one that you want to come back for, whether he's in Camp Crystal Lake or in space.
It's a weird conundrum for a writer to be handed that, and especially because, again, I might have said this before, but like the challenge was, how big and more grandiose of a death can we give this killer? And they do. And then the next writer is essentially handed this and saying like, okay, bring him back. So, it's a tough thing. No superhero movie has ever been handed that, have been like, well, we killed this person off in the last movie, but your movie is entirely focused around how that person comes back to life and comes back. It's like, no, not really. It's just they find a different villain.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Friday the 13th. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. Friday the 13th, rated R.
I was going to ask you, Pete, do you remember your first instance in your first encounter with the Friday the 13th franchise?
Not specifically, but, when you talk about like the Mount Rushmore of like slasher franchises, I feel like I've always gravitated towards Friday the 13th as kind of been like my favorite personally. I mean, Halloween, obviously the first Halloween, probably one of the best standalone movies of that genre. But there's something about the Friday the 13th series, I'll say to a point, because I'm going to be very like get off my lawn. But like, I feel like after part 6, I'm kind of like, as I've gotten older, I'm like kind of like done with the franchise there, because it just, the zombie Jason thing, I know a lot of people love it. I was more, again, being younger when I first saw, the movies, and I have to say that these were like on cable for me, watching with friends and cousins. But like the stuff that was more grounded in reality, quote unquote reality, that was the stuff that got me. And just like more like it had, those early ones just had like a grittier feel, like the film, I think we talked about once you get to part 4, there starts to become a bit of a gloss on it. And that's not to take away from it. I mean, part 4 is wildly entertaining. But then, like, they just, even though the budgets were shrinking, they started to look better. They were filmed more like it out in California, more on sound stages as opposed to on location. So it lost a little something for me. So, I mean, I still loved it as a kid. I think the first one I saw in the theater was part 5, which is a weird one to be your first one to see in the movies. But, and I was 13. I begged my mom to take me because I couldn't believe that, they said the final chapter was the last one. How they wouldn't lie about that, but yet here's another Friday the 13th. This is incredible. So yeah, so I feel like I've grown up with Friday the 13th in many ways, and so I have like a very it's something that is very near and dear to my heart, because I have a lot of great memories of watching it with various friends throughout the years. But a couple of years ago, around Halloween, while I was living in Florida, the Tampa Theater had like a week where they were showing horror movies all week long, and they did a double feature of Friday the 13th, the original and the final chapter that I went to go see. And the theater was packed. It was a great experience to see those 2 movies in the theater with a raucous, loud crowd, and I loved it. And I think that's just the power of these movies. They're not great movies, but they're entertaining, and they provided tons of entertainment for many of us over the years.
In your scrapbook, Josh, when was your first encounter with Jason? Was it just young Josh Spiegel in like a wood paneled basement watching Friday the 13th on cable, VHS, mom and pop store rental?
That's pretty much. I mean, the wood panel basement is it's crazily spot on. Most of the movies I watched, I did get into horror a little bit later in my life. I didn't watch horror movies until I was a teenager. I was definitely afraid of them. The matter of fact that the first Friday the 13th movie that I went to the theater to go see, I was a grown ass man, and I went to go see Jason Goes to Hell in the movie theater. That's the first one I can remember actually going to, but I don't honestly, I don't remember which was the first one that I actually saw first. Part of me wants to say that the first one that I actually watched was 3. I just know that it did take me a while to watch them because I just would not do horror movies, but I did have a big affinity for Jason once I became enamored with horror movies. Because again, I think I said this the last time, but the thing that turned my mind on horror movies was a documentary about Tom Savini, where he showed how he did a lot of things. And there was a big focus in that video where they showed the prop head of Jason in part 4 with a machete in it and everything like that. And he was talking about how he did it, and he actually had the prop right there. And that was one of those things of like, oh, that's cool. So it's just like a fake head that they stick the machete in. So I always felt sort of an affinity towards that one specifically because of Tom Savini showing me how he did it all, which was pretty neat. Honestly, for the most part, I don't remember which of them was, but I always loved Jason. But one of my personal favorites is a Zombie Jason episode. So I do have an appreciation for Zombie Jason. 8 is the point when I'm like, okay, now it's starting to be a bit of a chore here. But I still actually enjoy those later episodes. Like, I like watching 8. I think it's crappy, but I enjoy it. It's goofy. I like 9 more than most people because I think it's just weird and dopey, and I enjoy the hell out of it. I do kind of hate Jason X, though. Do not like that one at all. And I really hate the remake.
Bernie, what about you? What was your entry point?
I was going to say it's a little bit of both, because with you guys, I discovered horror a lot later, because it wasn't until I went away to college that I could rent these without like my parents looking over my shoulder at the video store saying, you can't rent that. Like, I could get past Highlander. So it's like, oh, it looks like it could be a period piece. So it's fine. Predator was a little like 50-50. But yeah, you see Jason, it's like my mom would like watch me pick it up and I could turn around and I could already see her be like, no, like that's never going to happen. Like, you're not going to rent to that. Like, go rent Rad Racer or Excite Bike, because that's you'll get away with that, but not this. So I never tried. But yeah, first year in college, go to the local video store. Yeah, I've said this before. I started with A, I went through Z. That's how I saw a lot of these films, renting these movies and watching them for the first time. Like, I was binging them.
There's no need to fear the number 13 any longer, because Paramount is slashing prices on 13 scary motion picture hits. At only $19.95 each, no one will be able to resist the sharp savings on some of their worst fears.
Okay, you big hunk of a man, come and get me.
Everyone's just dying for Jason. And now his latest stab at terror has been slashed to just $19.95. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. Plus, customers can scream again and again with the entire Friday the 13th Never Say Die collection. And the terror continues with 6 more shock-filled hits.
The house is burning.
Christopher Walken can see the future and must stop it dead in Stephen King's The Dead Zone. And Pet Sematari's master of horror strikes again with The Cry of a Werewolf, Stephen King's Silver Bullet. There's life out there, and they are conducting some wild experiments. Watch out for Dr. Alien. It attacks without mercy and preys on the mind. There's no escape from brain damage.
The Ripper's still out there.
The world's most notorious killer is on the loose again. Jack's back. Serial killer David Keith is on a rampage, but don't shoot until you see the white of the eye. 13 will be every video store's luckiest number, with these 13 Halloween horror hits, specially reduced to just $19.95 each.
In some ways, it wasn't until later that I started to really appreciate them, because I was like, oh yeah, this is getting a little ridiculous, but I felt a little bit of that. I got to check these off of the box. Like, I'm kind of making up for lost time. But then when I was, like you said, Josh, a grown-ass man, I was like, okay, now let's kind of slow this down again. I'm liking 1 through 6. All right. The Manhattan thing. I like the gimmick. And I think this is for all of the Friday movies. They're all very much a product of their time, for better or for worse. What is it? Part 1, total, knocking off the success of Halloween in 78. So it makes sense. But then, like, as the series progresses, you see, what was it, a Platinum Dunes, talking about, like, the reboot that you weren't too much of a fan of, Josh. It's like, yeah, that was a product of its time, too. So after a while, the mileage varies. And I think not just for us, for a lot of people that watch this and say, you know what, if you get to 1, 2, and 3, I'm good. If you give me a little bit of final chapter, all right, that's cool. Jason Lives, that's great. But after a while, like, you're like, yeah, it's okay. I'm sure those come in like the Scream Factory collection. So I guess I got to own those too. Like, that's fine.
I will say that out of the major franchises that there are, the big 3 being Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween would be the big 3. And if you extend the family out a little bit, you got Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you got Hellraiser.
Chucky, you mentioned before, even Leprechaun. I got a few of those in there.
Yeah, but out of those core 3, it's the most consistently entertaining. Halloween for me falls off a massive cliff, and I just don't enjoy watching about half of the Halloween movies. I get no joy whatsoever out of.
So are you a fan of 3, Josh?
I love Halloween 3.
Okay.
I wish Halloween dropped Michael Myers and just did the anthology thing, because Halloween 3 is great. And it's a fun story.
You and John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, Josh.
I know. I love it. I love it. 2, I enjoy 2, but I don't love it. It's a really big drop off from part 1. I feel like part 2 is better when you watch it right after part 1, and you get that whole feeling of like it's one continual night. And the Freddy movies are just so wildly all over the place, because there'll be one that I'll be like, oh, I love that, and then the next one I'll be like, I hated it.
It's like the one glue for that one is Robert Englund. But like you said, to your point, like, it just varies so much based on the tone. That's a good point. Yeah, I think we're Friday, it is as consistent in its inconsistency. It's like, it's entertaining. It's a product of its time for whatever it is. But at least from movie to movie, you kind of know what you're going to get.
I go back to the quote that my friend Derek from Shindig Radio, that out of the big 3, with Nightmare on Elm Street, you're getting the single best character in Freddy Krueger. With Halloween, you're getting the best movie, the best individual movie. And with Friday the 13th, you're getting the best overall experience from movie to movie.
Friday, May 13th. It's Jason versus Tina.
Don't go in there!
The match made in hell.
There goes the neighborhood.
Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, rated R. Starts Friday, May 13th.
Which I still remember, anecdotal aside, that was one where I remember going to see that in the movies. And that was back in the day where you could get some random person in line to pretend to be your, quote, uncle to get you a rated R movie. And it was me, John Zemsky, and our friend Pete DeVito. And our friend Pete DeVito was just this loud, Italian guy, mostly had a heart of gold. But when the Weed Whacker comes out, he and someone else both yelled out, "It's the Weed Whacker," in the theater, and like the whole place just went crazy. It was one of those, communal theater experiences that you seem to get less and less these days. But man, back in the 80s.
I think that goes back to Josh's point about the entertainment value, because you see this with an audience. It gives something else to the momentum of the movie, because then if you're watching it on your own, part of like an AMC marathon, or you're just, bringing out the Blu-ray and like, let me just watch them all back to back to back. It can be a little bit of a slug where you're like, I don't know that maybe I'll just skip A New Blood. Maybe Jason Goes to Hell. Like, I'll watch the intro, but, do I really need to watch the rest? It's like, yeah, I'll just skip to the end where Freddy brings them in and there's like the random demon magical claws that come out of nowhere and the dagger of magic, the Necronomicon. It's like, yeah, I'll just skip through that. Or maybe, for that matter, I'll just go to Josh's YouTube channel and just watch him do the highlights. Like I can just skip that episode and that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Well, I think an interesting thing about the Friday the 13th series is that, and I agree, like with what Josh was saying, I think more so than Halloween, and I think definitely more so than Nightmare on Elm Street, if we're going to hoist those up as like the three major ones, like you really see the progression of slasher movies through as that series progresses. Even just from the standpoint of first one, you've got your killer, like you kind of see that evolution of where audiences went from wanting the killer to get their comeuppance and get killed at the end to, oh, hey, these kids are really annoying. I think I'm kind of rooting for Jason to kill all of them. And you kind of see that progression like through certainly like 3, 4, 5, 6, like the kids and the counselors and the 20-somethings trying to play teens, get progressively more and more, annoying and disposable, where you're like actively rooting for them, and their demise, as opposed to like early on in the series, say what you will about the character development of these movies, but like you're like, okay, well, like, Alice, I hope she comes through this, or you were rooting for the people to survive the night, as opposed to you rooting for Jason to just wreak holy havoc on all of them. And it's interesting how that over a fairly short period of time, a couple of years, that like just changes.
Well, and think about this is one of the weirdest things to kind of throw out there about the Friday the 13th movie, that in hindsight is something that is, I think, strange to comprehend. The first two movies are whodunits, because a lot of the old slasher movies all hinged upon that. Which of these characters is actually the killer? Who could it possibly be? And when you watch the first movie, it's a straight up whodunit. Sure, the answer is completely out of left field and makes no sense, because it's like, oh, whodunit? A character you've never met before. But the second movie, you as the audience member don't know that it's Jason when you're watching those movies for the first time with no knowledge of this series whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, considering that the first movie showed you Jason popping up out of lake as a kid, the idea of it being Jason seemed weird. So you're probably thinking like, oh, who is it? It could be any one of these characters. And then at the ending where they're like, no, it actually is Jason. It's kind of a surprise. I mean, it's not to us now, because we see, the very first instance we see Jason, we're like, Jason. But when that came out, they didn't. It was still a mystery movie. And obviously, anything after that, it's no longer a mystery movie, with the exception of part 5.
Easy to forget, because, yeah, you're right. In the first one, they use the musical cue to at least let you know from the POV of Jason's mom that there is at least a consistent
spoiler
theme.
Alert. My God.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. 1980. I think we're past like the statute of limitations for spoilers at this. Yeah. If you hit play on this podcast, you knew what you were getting into, people. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, no, that's a good point, Josh. Yeah, the musical cue is meant to at least help the audience realize there is a character, like you mentioned, that you don't see till the end, that is responsible for this. And then in the second one, in rewatching it, and I think I probably rewatch it every other year or so, and I skip around the franchise. But I think watching it again, I noticed that there are a few moments where they almost set up how any of these teenagers, these characters, could be the killer. And, that poor snake that poor snake, actually, like, there was no consultant on the set that was like, yeah, let's not cut that snake in half. But all of those little sprinkles to be like, well, is the kid with the sudden burst of rage and the machete in his hand, could he be this person? But then to your point, Josh, you're like, oh, no. We just did that. Red herrings. In the end, it's just the kid who came out of the lake. It's him. It was him the whole time.
This is one of the reasons why I actually really appreciate part 5. It does bring back that whole notion of whodunit.
There are those who believe that the terror of Jason is buried forever. They're wrong. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. Rated R.
And to me, the idea that, like, the audience was mad that it wasn't Jason, but like Jason was dead, so making it a whodunit and you actually being surprised about who the killer was felt like a throwback to what the first and second movie were. And the second movie, it was just like, is this Jason? Jason is supposed to be dead. Oh, but it actually is him. It's that same thing, but just subverting it. Like, you think Jason's dead. No, but he is dead. This is somebody else.
Yes.
And I love that.
I was saying, like, an interesting thing about that one, and, you know, you were talking earlier, Josh, about, like, you know, some of the continuity issues that this series has, but what I give them credit for, and did not, this was like well over my head until only a couple of years ago, you know, they made that point to have the mask with the blue stripe marks instead of the red ones, but at the beginning of it, when Corey Feldman is having his little flashback, it's the actual mask. And then when he's seeing Jason in his visions, it's the mask with the red. But like when when the spoiler alert, Roy is killing people, it's got like the blue. So like, I'm like, that was like a little attention to detail that maybe doesn't seem like that big a deal. But when you're talking about like a series like this, I actually give them credit for like introducing that little subtle change. Because again, like, yeah, like you're talking, when you go to see this without having all of the history from that point to draw from, and you're like, what's going on here? Like, there's this whodunit. Those are like some little things that I think were way more subtle and way more subversive than, I think you pointed this out in the movie timeline, Josh, when like you get the musical and you get that lingering shot of Roy when he sees like the body and he's like doing like the slight shake. And like, you know, when you look back on it, like, wow, of course it was him. But
there was no subtlety in that shot.
Yeah. Well, and the whole aspect with the mask is great. And it's also one of the things that always confuses me about the series, because Jason himself only wears like a couple of masks in the whole series. Like he wears the mask that he gets from Shelley in part 3 is the mask that he wears all the way up until it's destroyed in part 7. Tommy brings him the original mask back when he's dead. So that mask is consistent. But then in part 8, they had the perfect opportunity to be like, all right, we're going to go with this, you know, a brand new mask. It's clean mask. But then there's some random dude just happens to have a hockey mask that is exactly the same with the little notch in it and everything. It's like, wait, what? But so I like the notion that you had this other killer that obviously had to get a different mask that wasn't actually Jason's mask. So it was different, because it probably would be different. What are the odds that the two hockey masks are going to be exactly the same?
And I like,
it's like Michael Myers, like going into the convenience store, and always there just happens to be a Shatner mask for him to like pluck off the shelf.
There's always a Woolworth or like a Ben Cooper Shatner mask sitting somewhere. 100%.
Your Halloween headquarters for Ben Cooper Costumes. A fun selection for children from Sesame Street to Superman. Your choice $3.97 or adult styles at $14.97. For Topstone Mask, highly detailed full-face styles for teens and adults with plush hair and only $5.97. Do it yourself with this Pause Makeup Kit for $3.97. For candy, treats you can trust for tricksters of all sizes, including this fine assortment from Hershey. Happy Halloween from Woolworths.
There was that comment that you brought up in your video too, Josh, talking about Jason Takes Manhattan, where I liked your theory. Like, well, he goes to Manhattan, and you know, as New York does on a regular basis, you know, the evening toxic disposal in the sewers. Yeah, but then, you know, the mask kind of tightens around his face, and you know, when he maybe Ubers his way back to Crystal Lake or canoes or whatever, kayaks on his way back in that little inlet between Manhattan and Crystal Lake, the mask gets a little tighter. And I appreciate it, Josh, that you were trying to be like, there's a way where there's continuity that can be brought here. And then you double down on that by saying, and probably because he goes back to Camp Crystal Lake, that's why the authorities find him and Jason goes to hell. So Jason be like, you know, this guy looks creepy. We should follow this guy. Next thing you know, that's how we get to Jason Goes to Hell.
Well, what's funny is invariably on almost any unanswered questions video that I do, and on quite a few of the timelines, there's usually like one commenter that will make a comment about like, oh man, who even thinks about this all that much? Man, it's just a waste of time and whatever, you know, get a life or blah, blah, blah. First of all, I was raised in the era of the no prize, of the Marvel Comics no prize, which was write in and try to, like, if you see an error, don't just say, oh, that's an error. Hey, have fun with it and come up with an explanation.
It's a badge of honor. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. As a horror movie fan, I just think it's kind of fun. Like, it's kind of fun to try to figure out how he got from Manhattan to Jason Goes to Hell. I know the writers didn't. The writers didn't care. They were just like, oh, he's there. As a fan, it's kind of fun to do that. Yes.
50,000 plus people can't be wrong, right? They can't be wrong. Yes.
Yes, I definitely engage with the trolls at times because it does, because then they comment more and then it's engagement.
Well, I mean, especially I think with Friday, because it kind of begs engagement because people just enjoy it, in their ways, in different ways. So, but you mentioned talk about maybe not enjoying it. So you weren't a fan of the reboot then, Josh, huh?
No, I do not like the reboot.
Stay tuned for more of the Friday the 13th movie marathon, only on the new TNN.
All right, and that's the end of part 1 of our discussion with Josh Spiegel about the Friday the 13th franchise. In part 2, we'll get into why Josh does not like the 2009 reboot remake. We also discuss some of the Friday the 13th video games from the NES version to the more recent multiplayer online game. We go over a few of the Friday the 13th fan films that are out there, including Never Hike Alone. We pick our favorite installments in the Friday the 13th franchise and our favorite versions of Jason. So make sure to tune into part 2 of our discussion about the Friday the 13th franchise. Make sure to check out Josh Spiegel's YouTube channel, Movie Timelines. And thanks for listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast.